For section 11.3, I want to look at a problem in the exercise set. So when we look at this problem, we're going to do a hypothesis test, and we're going to look at the confidence interval with the same data. So problem number 22, we're looking at the flexibility, we're comparing the flexibility of men versus women. And so all of our data is in inches. So I've got the mean and the sample standard deviation, and I'm looking at 45 men, and then the mean and the sample standard deviation looking at 31 women. And the physical therapist believes that women are more flexible than men. So we're going to start the problem by going over here to stat. We're coming down to T-stat to sample with summary data. My sample 1, which we're going to call our men, the sample mean is 18.64. The sample standard deviation is 3.29, and my sample size was 45 men. In sample number 2, the sample mean was 20.99 inches. The sample standard deviation, 2.07 inches, and the sample size was 31. So we're going to do a hypothesis test. We always say that there is no difference, and we're going to say that the two of them, the comparison is less than. So the difference between men minus women is less than 0. And I'm going to click on compute. So when I click on compute, my test statistic is negative 3.818448, and my p-value is 0.0001. So over here, I'm going to put reject the null hypothesis. So that would be our decision doing a hypothesis test for this flexibility, men versus women. Now let's look at the confidence interval. So in this one's case, the p-value was 0.0001, and the alpha value that we were comparing it to was 0.01, reject the null hypothesis. So now I'm going to go back, and I'm going to do exactly the same thing, but we're going to do the confidence interval instead. So to sample with summary, and we're going to go through and we're going to take our sample mean, 18.64, the sample standard deviation, 3.29, and the 45 men. Sample 2, 20.99, sample standard deviation 2.07, and the sample size of 31. And this time, let's do a confidence interval, and we're going to do our confidence interval with a 95% level of confidence, and then I'm going to say compute. So it says that our confidence interval is between negative 3.5764 on and on to negative 1.12358. So I'm going to come over here into the Excel spreadsheet, and I'm going to put this confidence interval in here. So let's say negative 3.58 to negative 1.12. So the thing I wanted to show you with this example is we're rejecting the null hypothesis. And remember, the null hypothesis was that there is no difference. The idea that mu1 minus mu2 equals 0. So if the difference is 0, 0 should be in the confidence interval. The confidence interval that we wrote down is negative 3.58 to negative 1.12. 0 is not in that interval, and so it's a reject because the hypothesis test is saying reject, and the confidence interval does not have 0 in its interval. So they're saying exactly the same thing. They're speaking to one another as far as the hypothesis test and the confidence interval. If you didn't reject the null hypothesis, you should expect to see a 0 somewhere in that interval. So that interval should encapsulate 0. So I wanted to do this example specifically to show you the relationship and the correlation between the null hypothesis and the confidence interval and how they need to come to the same conclusion.